December 17th, 1944. Pacific Ocean, 280 miles east of the Philippines. The convoy of 6 American destroyers cut through the slate-gray waters under an overcast sky, their wakes stretching behind them like white scars on the ocean's surface. Lieutenant Commander James Harrington of the USS Manat El Abele stood on the bridge, confident that their mission to intercept Japanese supply lines would proceed without significant resistance. After all, American naval dominance in the Pacific had been all but assured by this late stage of the war. "This will be a routine patrol," he assured his officers, unaware that within 72 hours his would be the only ship to return to base, carrying information so vital it would alter the final months of the Pacific campaign. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. This is the story of how 6 American warships faced an unexpected enemy and how the sole survivor brought back intelligence that would save thousands of American lives. The small destroyer squadron had departed from Ulithi Atoll 3 days earlier. Task Group 38, 4. 7 consisted of 6 Fletcher-class destroyers, USS Manat El Abele, USS Halligan, USS Harridan, USS Newcomb, USS Leutze, and USS Bennion. Their mission was straightforward: patrol the shipping lanes east of Luzon and intercept any Japanese supply vessels attempting to reinforce their dwindling garrisons in the Philippines. Captain Theodore Wallace, the squadron commander aboard the USS Halligan, had assembled his officers in the wardroom before departure. "Gentlemen, this is a standard interdiction mission. Intelligence reports minimal Japanese naval presence in our patrol sector. The enemy is on the run, their fleet crippled after Leyte Gulf. We expect to encounter only light merchant vessels, possibly with destroyer escort." Commander Michael Reynolds of the USS Harridan raised his hand. "Any word on submarine activity in the area, sir?" Wallace shook his head. "Submarine Command reports that enemy sub-activity has decreased by 63% in this sector over the past month. The Japanese are conserving what little fuel they have left. If we encounter anything, it will likely be merchant shipping." The confidence among the officers was palpable. By December 1944, American industrial might had reached its full wartime potential. The U.S. Navy had commissioned 32 new destroyers in the past year alone, while Japan struggled to replace its losses. American shipyards were producing vessels at a rate of 1 destroyer every 2 weeks, compared to the Japanese capacity of roughly 1 every 2 months. The statistics reinforced their sense of superiority. Lieutenant James Peterson, a 26-year-old radar officer aboard the USS Bennion, wrote in his diary that evening, "Another patrol, another chance to add to our tally. The Japanese Navy is a shadow of what we faced at Guadalcanal. The men are in high spirits, talking about being home for next Christmas. Some even wonder if we'll see any action at all." As the 6 destroyers sailed westward, the crew of the USS Manat El Abele went about their duties with the practiced efficiency that comes from months at sea. Chief Petty Officer Frank Moretti, a 38-year-old veteran from Boston, supervised the maintenance of the forward 5-inch guns. The smell of gun oil and metal polish filled the air as sailors worked in the morning heat. "Keep those barrels spotless," Moretti barked, though his heart wasn't in the reprimand. "Though God knows when we'll actually fire them at something other than practice targets." Seaman First Class Robert Jenkins, barely 19 and still with traces of acne on his face, looked up from his polishing. "Chief, is it true the Japs are almost finished? My brothers with the Marines on Peleliu says they're just mopping up now." Moretti's expression sobered. "Don't believe everything you hear, Jenkins. A desperate enemy is a dangerous one. Remember that." On the bridge of the USS Newcomb, Lieutenant Commander Howard Phillips tracked their position on the chart. At 27, Phillips was one of the youngest destroyer commanders in the Pacific Fleet, having received his promotion after the previous captain was killed during the Battle of Leyte Gulf. The responsibility weighed heavily on him. Current position is latitude 15 degrees, 42 minutes north, longitude 125 degrees, 18 minutes east, reported Ensign William Cooper, the navigation officer. We're maintaining course 270, speed 15 knots. Phillips nodded, studying the chart. Weather report? Barometric pressure dropping, sir. Meteorology predicts a storm system moving in from the southeast. Could hit us by tomorrow evening. Very well. Inform the squadron commander. Aboard the squadron flagship USS Halligan, Captain Wallace received the weather report with mild concern. Bad weather could complicate their patrol, but might also provide cover for Japanese shipping trying to slip through to Manila. He decided to continue as planned. That evening, as the sun set behind a bank of darkening clouds, the 6 destroyers maintained their patrol formation. On the USS Leutzer, radioman second class Daniel Rodriguez sat at his station, the glow of instrument panels illuminating his concentrated face. The steady hum of equipment and the occasional crackle of static formed a familiar background to his thoughts. At 22:13 hours, Rodriguez caught a faint signal. He adjusted his headphones, frowning in concentration. The transmission was weak in Japanese naval code. He immediately notified the communications officer, Lieutenant Gregory Mason. Sir, I've intercepted a partial transmission. Japanese origin, naval code. Signal strength suggests it's within 100 miles of our position. Mason's interest peaked. Can you determine the source? Negative, sir. Signal was too brief and fragmented. Keep monitoring. Report any additional transmissions immediately. The night passed without further incident. By morning, the weather had deteriorated as predicted. Grey clouds hung low over churning seas, and a steady rain reduced visibility to less than 2 miles. The 6 destroyers maintained their formation, though the rolling waves made it difficult. On the USS Manat El Abele, Lieutenant Commander Harrington ordered a heightened state of readiness. Something about the intercepted transmission and the worsening weather unsettled him. His instincts, honed through 3 years of war, whispered a warning. At 09:47 hours, radarman Walter Simmons called out from his station, "Contact! Multiple contacts bearing 315, range 12 miles, closing fast." Harrington was at the radar screen in 3 strides. How many? At least 8. No, 10 contacts, sir. Speed approximately 25 knots. Harrington's stomach tightened. Sound general quarters. All hands to battle stations. Throughout the ship, the alarm blared. Men raced to their stations, pulling on helmets and life vests as they ran. The tension was electric, a current running through the steel vessel. Captain Wallace's voice crackled over the squadron radio channel. "All ships, this is Halligan. Form defensive perimeter. Prepare for surface engagement." The 6 American destroyers swung into a circular formation, guns trained outward. The rain intensified, sheets of water reducing visibility further. Radar was their only reliable sense in the storm. On the USS Benion, Lieutenant Peterson monitored the approaching contacts. "Sir, profile and speed consistent with Japanese destroyers. Possible flagship is larger, could be a light cruiser." Commander Samuel Wright nodded grimly. "So much for intelligence reports. Looks like the Japanese still have some fight left." The first shells whistled overhead at 10:12 hours, splashes erupting 200 yards short of the USS Harridan. The American ships returned fire, their 5-inch guns booming in defiance. Through gaps in the rain, they caught glimpses of their attackers, sleek, grey shapes with the unmistakable profile of Akizuki-class destroyers, Japan's newest and most advanced destroyer type. What followed was a swirling, chaotic battle in the rain. The Japanese force executed a perfect pincer movement, splitting into 2 groups to attack from multiple angles. Their gunnery was exceptional, especially considering the poor visibility. Aboard the USS Newcomb, Lieutenant Commander Phillips shouted orders as his ship shuddered under a direct hit. Damage control to forward fire room. Helm, hard to port. "Sir," cried the radar operator, "two enemy vessels approaching from starboard, range 400 yards. Phillips made a split-second decision. All guns to starboard. Prepare to launch torpedoes. The Newcomb swung around, bringing her torpedoes to bear. But before they could launch, 3 shells struck in rapid succession. One penetrated the forward torpedo mount, triggering a catastrophic explosion that tore through the ship's midsection. The Newcomb began to list heavily to starboard, black smoke pouring from her ruptured hull. On the USS Halligan, Captain Wallace watched in horror as the Newcomb was engulfed in flames. Bennion moved to assist Newcomb. Abele and Leutzer continue engagement with the enemy force to port. Harridan, with me, to starboard. The squadron was now fighting for survival. The Japanese attackers displayed a level of coordination and tactical proficiency that shocked the Americans. These were not the desperate, fuel-starved remnants they had expected, but a well-trained and determined force. At 10:36 hours, the USS Bennion took multiple hits while attempting to rescue survivors from the Newcomb. Her forward gun mount was destroyed, and fires broke out along her deck. Commander Wright ordered an emergency withdrawal, but another salvo struck the destroyer's engineering spaces, leaving her dead in the water. Lieutenant Peterson found himself in command after Commander Wright and the executive officer were killed by the same shell. Wounded sailors filled the passageways, their cries barely audible over the roar of fires and the continued thunder of battle. "Abandon ship!" Peterson ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos. "All hands, abandon ship!" On the USS Harridan, Commander Reynolds fought desperately to protect the stricken Bennion. His ship maneuvered aggressively, guns blazing at the approaching Japanese vessels. For a moment, it seemed the Harridan might hold them off long enough for the Bennion survivors to escape. Then a different threat appeared. Japanese aircraft approaching from the north. The lookout's cry sent a new wave of fear through the American sailors. The storm clouds had partially cleared to the north, allowing a squadron of Japanese torpedo bombers to approach undetected by radar. They struck with devastating precision, focusing their attack on the Harridan and the already crippled Bennion. Commander Reynolds watched helplessly as torpedoes streaked toward his ship. "Helm, hard to starboard, maximum speed." The Harridan began her turn, but too late. 2 torpedoes struck her port side, the explosions lifting the 100-ton destroyer partially out of the water. She listed immediately, taking on water through massive gashes in her hull. Reynolds struggled to his feet, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. "Radio, send distress call with our position. Damage control, report." "All engineering spaces flooded, sir," came the grim reply. "We're losing power. Hull integrity compromised in multiple sections." Reynolds looked around at his wounded bridge crew, at the fires spreading across his dying ship. "Abandon ship, get the wounded into the rafts first." By 11:05 hours, 3 of the 6 American destroyers were either sunk or in the process of sinking. The USS Leutzer and USS Halligan continued to fight, now joined by the USS Manat El Abele in a triangular defensive formation. Captain Wallace's voice was tense, but controlled over the radio. "Abele, we'll cover your withdrawal. You're the least damaged. Make for Ulithi at best possible speed." Aboard the Abele, Lieutenant Commander Harrington protested. "Sir, we can't leave you." "That's an order, Commander," Wallace cut him off. "Someone has to report what we've encountered here. This wasn't a random patrol, this was an ambush. They knew we were coming." As if to punctuate his words, the USS Halligan took a direct hit to her bridge. The explosion was visible even through the rain. Harrington made the hardest decision of his career. "Helm, come to course 090, all ahead flank. Radio, maintain radio silence." The Able turned away from the battle, increasing speed to 35 knots. Behind them, the Leutzer and Halligan continued to fight against overwhelming odds. Chief Moretti stood at the aft gun mount, watching as their sister ships dwindled into the rain and smoke. "God help them," he whispered. The Abel had not escaped unscathed. Her aft funnel was shattered, and shell holes punctured her starboard side. 15 men were dead, 27 wounded. But she could still make 30 knots, and her main guns remained operational. What the crew didn't know was that their withdrawal was being tracked. As they steamed eastward, a lone Japanese aircraft maintained distant contact, reporting their position. At 14 and 17 hours, with the main battle now 60 miles behind them, Radarman Simmons detected new contacts. Aircraft bearing 170, range 15 miles, 10 contacts. Harrington reacted instantly. "All hands to general quarters. All guns, prepare for air attack." The Abele's 5-inch guns and numerous 40mm and 20mm anti-aircraft weapons were soon firing into the sky as Japanese torpedo bombers made their approach. The ship zigzagged desperately, throwing off the attacker's aim. 2 torpedoes missed narrowly, their wakes visible just yards from the destroyer's hull. A third seemed certain to hit when Harrington ordered a final, desperate turn to port. The torpedo passed so close that sailors on deck swore they could have touched it. The Abel's gunners claimed 3 Japanese aircraft shot down before the remainder broke off the attack. But Harrington knew they wouldn't give up so easily. Something about this encounter was different. The Japanese were committing significant resources to ensure no American ship escaped. As darkness fell, Harrington called his executive officer, Lieutenant Victor Holloway, to his sea cabin. "They're hunting us specifically," Harrington said without preamble. "This isn't a random patrol gone wrong. They've committed at least 10 destroyers and 2 air groups to ensure we don't make it back to base." Holloway's expression was grim. "You think there's a leak in our intelligence?" "It's possible. Or they've broken our naval codes again." Harrington rubbed his tired eyes. "But there's something else. Why target us so specifically? We're not carrying any special cargo or personnel." "Unless there's something we don't know about," Holloway suggested. Harrington nodded slowly. "Have the radio man bring all communications logs for the past week. And I want to speak to the navigation officer as well." What followed was a meticulous examination of their mission orders and communications. Nothing seemed unusual until they reviewed the navigational charts provided for the patrol. Ensign Thomas Whitfield, the navigation officer, spread the chart on the table. "This was the standard chart package provided at Ulithi, sir. Nothing unusual about it." Harrington frowned, studying the chart. "These depth soundings along our patrol route, when were they last updated?" Whitfield checked the chart legend. "Survey data from August 1944, sir. That's relatively recent." "And who conducted those surveys?" "USS Swordfish, submarine, part of the preparation for the Philippines campaign." Harrington's eyes narrowed. "Show me exactly where we were when the Japanese force engaged us." Whitfield marked the position. Harrington studied it, then slowly traced a line along their intended patrol route. "The attack came just as we were entering this section of recently surveyed waters," he said quietly. "Lieutenant Holloway, what if the Japanese aren't trying to stop us from returning with information? What if they're trying to stop us from discovering something?" Throughout the night, the Abel ran at flank speed, periodically changing course to evade potential pursuers. The wounded were cared for in the makeshift sick bay, while damage control parties worked to patch the worst of the damage. In the radio room, Chief Radioman Victor Martinez worked with Lieutenant Holloway to review all recent submarine communications from the area. Martinez, a 31-year-old from New Mexico with a photographic memory for code patterns, noticed something unusual. "Sir, the Swordfish transmitted a routine patrol report on August 24th, then went silent for 3 days. When they resumed communication, they were well east of their assigned survey area." Holloway leaned closer. Was there any explanation given? Nothing in the logs, sir. But their next communication was flagged priority and sent directly to ComSubPac headquarters in Pearl Harbor, not through normal channels. By dawn, the Abeli had put nearly 200 miles between herself and the site of the battle. No further Japanese attacks had materialized, but Harrington remained vigilant. He ordered a slight course change that would take them over the exact area where the USS Swordfish had conducted her survey. At 0830 hours, Harrington assembled a small team in the sonar room. Holloway, Martinez, Whitfield, and Chief Sonarman Edgar Wilson, a taciturn veteran with over 20 years of naval service. "Wilson, I want continuous sonar sweeps as we cross the survey area. Record everything no matter how insignificant it seems. Martinez, monitor all frequencies for any submarine transmissions." Wilson raised an eyebrow. "Looking for something specific, sir?" "I'm not sure yet, but there's something in these waters that's worth killing 6 American destroyers to protect." At 11:42 hours, the Abel entered the survey area. Sonar sweeps initially showed nothing unusual, just the expected contours of the Pacific seafloor. Then, at 12:17 hours, Wilson called Harrington to the sonar room. "Got something unusual, sir. Depth is consistent with surrounding terrain, but the acoustic return is different. It's absorbing rather than reflecting our pings." Harrington studied the sonar display. "Natural formation?" Wilson shook his head. "No, sir, the edges are too regular. It's approximately 400 feet long, 50 feet wide. Depth is about 180 feet. Harrington and Holloway exchanged glances. "A sunken ship?" Holloway suggested. "Possibly," Wilson replied. "But if so, it's lying almost perfectly level on the seabed. Most wrecks list to one side or break apart." Harrington made a decision. "Whitfield, mark this position precisely. Wilson, continue recording all sonar data. I want complete sweeps of a 5-mile radius around this anomaly." Over the next 3 hours, the Abel zigzagged across the area, building a comprehensive sonar picture of the seafloor. What emerged was remarkable. Not just one, but 3 large, regular shapes resting on the ocean bottom, each with similar acoustic properties. In his sea cabin, Harrington reviewed the compiled data with his officers. "These aren't natural formations, and they're not typical shipwrecks," he concluded. "They're too regular, too deliberately placed." Martinez cleared his throat. "Sir, during the war with Russia in 2005, the Japanese sank several old battleships as breakwaters to protect Port Arthur. Could these be something similar?" Harrington considered this. "Possible, but why here? There's nothing to protect. We're in the open ocean, hundreds of miles from any Japanese base." Holloway had been silent, studying the sonar charts. Now he looked up. "Unless they're not protecting something above the water, but something below it." The implication hung in the air. Harrington was the first to voice it. "A submarine base, an underwater submarine haven." The pieces began to fall into place. The Japanese Navy, driven from its surface bases by American advances, had established an underwater replenishment point for its submarine fleet. The regular structures were likely submerged concrete bunkers or supply depots, designed to allow submarines to resupply without surfacing. "That would explain the dedicated defense," Holloway said. "If we discovered this, their entire remaining submarine strategy in the Philippines would be compromised. And it explains why they tracked us so persistently," Harrington added. "They knew exactly what we might find." The Abel continued eastward, now carrying information of immense strategic value, but their ordeal wasn't over. Late that afternoon, radar detected more aircraft approaching from the west. "Here they come again," Harrington said grimly. "All hands to battle stations." This time, the attack was more determined. 12 torpedo bombers approached in waves of 3, testing the Abel's defenses from multiple angles. The destroyer's guns blazed continuously, creating a wall of flak around the ship. Seaman Jenkins, now manning a 20mm gun on the port side, tracked an incoming bomber with steady hands despite his racing heart. The plane grew larger in his sights, undeterred by the anti-aircraft fire erupting around it. "Steady! Steady!" Chief Moretti called from beside him. Jenkins fired in a continuous burst, his shells joining the barrage. The Japanese pilot held his course, dropping his torpedo just as Jenkins' tracers found their mark. The aircraft erupted in flames, cartwheeling into the sea, but its torpedo continued toward the Able. "Brace for impact!" The call echoed throughout the ship. The torpedo struck the aft section just below the No. 2 stack. The explosion lifted the stern partially out of the water, and alarms blared throughout the vessel. Damage control teams raced to contain flooding, while the remaining guns continued to fight off the attackers. In the engine room, water poured through ruptured bulkheads. Chief Engineer Raymond Collins directed his men with calm efficiency, despite the rising water. "Shore up that bulkhead. Get those pumps working." On the bridge, Harrington received the damage reports. The situation was critical, but not yet fatal. "Can we maintain speed?" "Engineering reports we can make 20 knots, sir, but no more than that. Aft fire room is flooding." "That will have to do. Maintain course for Ulithi." The Abele limped eastward through the night, fighting a constant battle against the flooding. Dawn brought no new attacks, suggesting they had finally outrun their pursuers, but the damaged destroyer was still 400 miles from safety. In the radio room, Martinez received an unexpected transmission. "Sir, it's from the submarine USS Seahorse. They're on patrol approximately 80 miles northeast of our position and are diverting to escort us." The news brought a wave of relief through the exhausted crew. 6 hours later, the sleek shape of the Seahorse surfaced 2 miles off their starboard bow. The submarine's commander, Lieutenant Commander Slade Cutter, communicated by signal lamp, "Observed Japanese search aircraft. Will escort to rendezvous with Destroyer Division 60 at coordinates Baker 7. With the Seahorse running interference, the Abel continued toward the rendezvous point. At 0920 hours the following day, the welcome sight of 3 American destroyers appeared on the horizon. The USS Nicholas, USS O'Bannon, and USS Taylor formed a protective screen around the damaged Abel for the final leg to Ulithi. Lieutenant Commander Harrington stood on the bridge as they approached the massive anchorage at Ulithi Atoll. His ship was the sole survivor of Task Group 38, 4-7, returning with 15 dead, 43 wounded, and information that would reshape the naval war in the Philippines. Within hours of their arrival, Harrington was flown to Admiral Nimitz's headquarters, where he presented the sonar data and his analysis. Naval intelligence officers confirmed his conclusions. The Japanese had established an underwater submarine haven, allowing their remaining fleet to operate despite American air superiority. The discovery led to Operation Undertow, a coordinated effort by submarines and aircraft to locate and destroy the underwater base. 2 weeks later, the USS Batfish, guided by the Abel's sonar charts, located and destroyed 3 Japanese submarines attempting to resupply at the hidden facility. Depth charges dropped in precise patterns collapsed the underwater structures, rendering the base unusable. In the war's aftermath, analysts estimated that the discovery saved as many as 15 American ships and 3 Zhouzhan sailors that would have been lost to submarines operating from the secret base. The full details remained classified until 1972, long after many of the participants had retired or passed away. James Harrington received the Navy Cross for his actions, but rarely spoke about the mission. In a 1967 interview, he reflected, "We didn't do anything special. The real heroes were the men on the other 5 ships. They died never knowing why they were targeted so fiercely. We just happened to be the ones who made it back." The fate of the other 5 destroyers remained uncertain for decades. The USS Newcomb and USS Benion were confirmed sunk during the engagement. The USS Halligan, USS Harridan, and USS Leutze were listed as lost with all hands, their exact locations unknown, until a 1992 expedition discovered the wreckage of the Harridan lying upright on the seafloor, directly above the remains of the Japanese submarine haven. Chief Petty Officer Frank Moretti, who survived to serve on 3 more ships before retiring in 1961, perhaps summarized it best in his memoirs. "We sailed together as 6 ships, brothers in steel. Only the Abel returned, carrying a secret that helped win the war. But the sacrifice of those other 5 crews, that's what victory is built on. Not the ships that come home, but the ones that don't." And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II, and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.